Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be talking about the remaining top free agents and some potential teams that they can land. And obviously, this free agency class wasn't the biggest names out there, but there was still some really good players out there that could help you, become a playoff team or help you develop your young players or even a championship team to add one more piece or two more. So let's get started with the first person we're going to talk about, the most veteran person in this video, Russell Westbrook, the Denver Nuggets, and he revived his career last year because a lot of people were saying this guy's going to be out of the league and he does not have a place around any team because he can't space the floor, he can't shoot. If he doesn't have the ball in his hand, he's not affecting the game. And yes, those things may be true, but if you look at his stats last year, 13.3 points a game, 4.9 rebounds, 6.1 assists. He did shoot 44% from the field and only 32% from three. And is he gonna space the floor and hit these dagger threes in clutch time? I don't think so, but you're gonna have to still contest with him, especially because he does not care if he makes or misses, and you have to live with that because that's who Russell Westbrook is. And at this point of his career, he knows he has to come off the bench because he's not going to start at any team around the league. And if he wants to play real minutes, he's going to have to become that spark plug off the bench. And I know it's hard becoming that role because he was this MVP and this starter and this all-star, this all NBA player, and now he gets traded to the Lakers a couple seasons ago, and that kind of just hurt his name. And obviously he kind of revived it with the Nuggets, but he was coming with the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic, and he makes everyone around him better. And obviously, I still think he could, help a team, more of a playoff team too. They're gonna need, a really good player because you can't trust Westbrook to be, a number, three or four option. He needs to just come off the bench and yeah, just become that spark plug. I could see a team like the Sacramento Kings doing it, or a Dallas Mavericks if they have like the salary cap. I could also see a team like the Phoenix Suns kind of signing him to a minimum contract too. And obviously Westbrook doesn't need the money, so I just think he really wants that ring. So I really hope he does sign with a playoff contender rather than just sign with a team that has a bunch of young players and he's just gonna play the most minutes. But maybe that's what he wants. But yeah, let's move into the next person we're gonna talk about, Al Horford with the Boston Celtics. And obviously the Celtics basically had to trade everyone from that championship team, trading Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. So I think they're gonna lose Al Horford, and I could see Al Horford, signing with the Golden State Warriors. And I like this signing because he's exactly what you need. Someone, his stats are 9 points a game, 6.2 rebounds, 2.1 assists. He did shoot, 42% from the field, but 36% from three, and that's what you need if you're the Golden State Warriors because you have Steph Curry, the greatest shooter to ever, step on the court. You have Jimmy Butler, you still have Gary Payton Jr. You have all these role players that are on this team that know their role. You're the only team that hasn't added anyone in free agency, and I think this is what you're waiting for. I thought they were gonna get a Brook Lopez, but that just didn't work out. I think that would have fit a little bit better just because I think he's a better rim protector than Al Horford. But if they get Al Horford, I still think this team is a really good team. It's just the Western Conference, it's stacked, and it's gonna be really hard, with an aging roster. Hopefully, injuries don't catch up to them. But if they do add Al Horford, I like this for the Warriors. And a player that's kind of weird in a sense, and what I mean weird is because he's a restricted free agent, and it's gonna be Quentin Grimes with the Sixers. I just like Quentin Grimes overall, but I am hearing rumors that he's asking for 25 to 30 million a year, and it's kind of hard because he had a slow start, and obviously he got traded to the Sixers from the Mavs, and he kind of picked up the second half of the season. But the second half of the season is kind of weird too in a sense because a lot of teams are kind of tanking more, and injuries happen, and they're kind of resting their players for the playoffs. So you kind of scoring the most in the second part of the season is kind of not as true of a stat as the first of the season. Obviously, it's going to be hard to score in the NBA period, so that's not a knock on him. But he did average about 14.6 points a game, 4.3 rebounds, 3 assists. Did shoot 46% from the field and about 37% from three. And these numbers are really good, especially from a role player, a 3-and-D player of Grimes. And I do like him. It's just he's not worth $30 million, and a lot of teams around the league are saying, hey, well, only 2 or 3 teams have salary cap to sign him, or saying that's not worth it. We might as well wait for next offseason. Obviously, it's a better, free agency class. And I do think Quentin Grimes is going to go back on that qualifying offer because I think around the league, it's just going to be hard to give, Quentin Grimes money. And I do think the Sixers will match any offer just because you really can't be affording to lose someone like that, a veteran. I know you did draft, VJ Ekholm, but you don't know how he's going to be against, real NBA competition. Obviously, in the summer league, he did, really good. He was pretty much, dominating the summer league. But those are not real NBA players. Most of them have like maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 on their roster. But on the core in the NBA, everyone's an NBA caliber player, especially, max NBA caliber players. And I could see, the 76ers obviously moving on from him too, maybe halfway through the season if he's really not playing well, or maybe he's playing too well and they know, hey, we're not going to be able to, keep him on this books. We might as well, capitalize while his value is the highest. But yeah, let's move on to the next person we're going to talk about, Jonathan Kaminga of the Golden State Warriors. And obviously, we've seen the friction between him and Steve Kerr, and even, the front office. They just don't like to develop, young players. I mean, we saw it with, James Wiseman. We kind of see it with Moses Moody, but, he's bought in a little bit more, defensively and more, passive. But, Kaminga, he's more natural scorer. This guy could average, 19 points a game. And last year, he did average only, 15 points a game and 4.6 rebounds, 2.2 assists. Did shoot 45% from the field and about 30% from three. And I think what kind of made more friction is that Jimmy Butler trade, because you're bringing in someone who's kind of in the same position as you, is older than you and it's kind of on his back end of his career. And you're kind of supposed to be, passing that torch. Steph Curry was supposed to pass that torch to you, Jonathan Kaminga. And it just didn't work out because, Steve Kerr doesn't believe in you in a sense, because you were averaging, 19 points last year and now you drop down in minutes and points because he's saying, well, you're not doing this. You're not passing the ball to Steph Curry enough. You're not being more of a defensive player than I would like you to be. And it's kind of like, well, I want to step up. I want to step up offensively. Can I be that second option? Can I be that third option? Because Clay's gone. I was supposed to step up and I want this much money. And it's obviously not worked out because rumors are saying like, hey, his team wanted, something similar to, that Jalen Green or, that 190 million type contract. And the Warriors basically said, no, we're not going to do that. But I think a sign-in trade is going to come. Now, who could be in that sign-in trade? I think one sign-in trade could be a Kobe White of the Chicago Bulls. And I say this because Kobe White revamped his name in the trade value market because, 2 seasons ago, we kind of saw his name kind of just, oh, this guy's worth maybe a second round pick and, an expiring contract or, a player that's not near the caliber of what, Kobe White is. And I think for Jonathan Kaminga, he needs a new star. And I think this is what he, deserves because he's still young. He's only 22, 23 years old. And yes, he's won a championship, but he didn't really do anything for that championship. And he kind of knows it, and the organization knows it too. And another sign and trade I could see is with the Sacramento Kings and Keegan Murray. And obviously, I do not think this is going to happen because the Kings, I don't really think are going to trade one of their young players, only really young player, promising players at least, for, Jonathan Kaminga, who's kind of not as, promising as Keegan Murray, even though their ceilings are not as high as you would like. But if you can get, 2, 3 first round picks from the Warriors and maybe Moody back, I think they should do it just because you're still going to have to pay Keegan Murray, $190 million or, even $200 million. And is he worth that? I don't know. I don't really think he is. And maybe you could just pay, Jonathan Kaminga, 170, 180 million. And yes, that's still a lot, maybe an overpay, but you're still, getting him for less than what Keegan Murray. And you're not really going to win a championship with Keegan Murray and DeMar DeRozan and, Dante Sabonis. And I just don't see this, really affecting the Sacramento Kings as much. And you're getting more feature asset. And for the Warriors, I think Keegan Murray fits in way better because he's a 3-and-D player. And obviously he broke Steph Curry's rookie record with the most threes, and he's still, his 3-point is going to translate, his defense is going to translate, and I think Kaminga just needs a new start, whether it's with the Bulls, Wizards, Rockets, Kings, it doesn't matter. He just needs a new start wherever he's at and not with Steve Kerr and the Warriors. And another restricted free agent we're going to talk about is Josh Giddey of the Chicago Bulls. And overall, I think there's people saying, hey, this guy wants 30 to 35 million dollars a year, and people know he's not worth it. He's worth, that 20 to, I would say max $28 million a year because he still has the same flaws he had in OKC. He really didn't improve that much. He still can't really space the floor as much as you would like. He's still a bad defender. I know he has his moments, but overall, people still attack him on defense. And we've seen it, in late game situations. And, the play-in tournament, that just did not go well. And that was kind of a cue to, hey, we got to blow this up. And we saw when they traded Lonzo Ball, hopefully they maybe, blow up more and trade more veterans. Obviously, you still have Kobe White, who maybe you could capitalize on his value while it's highest. You still have Vucevic, who I'm hearing, contract buyouts because no one really wants to trade for him. So hopefully we see, some youth movement. Josh Giddey, he's already playing, 30 plus minutes a game. He averaged about 14.6 points a game, 8.1 rebounds, 7.2 assists, and 46% from the field and about 37% from three. And yes, those numbers are good. And yes, that 3-point number is good. But if you look at the attempts of his 3-point shot, he only averaged about, 4 attempts a game from three. And yes, those numbers are better than the OKC days because I think he shot around, 27, 28% from three when he was with the Thunder. And obviously, shooting from 37% from three, that's improvement. What I'm saying is he needs to up his volume because he's the primary ball handler. And if he's going to be, a starting, shooting guard, a point guard in the NBA, especially at this day and age, he needs to up his volume. He needs to shoot, 7 or 8 threes a game and shoot around the same, 37%. And can he do that? I don't know. And I don't think the Bulls truly believe in, Josh Giddey and him developing that 3-point shot and, even developing his defensive, instinct. I mean, he's not a small guy. He's 6'7", 6'6", around that. But he's just always getting the tackle in the defensive end. And it's kind of, hey, do you take him out late game? Because, he is really good playmaker. And that's what you have him for. I mean, he was averaging, really good numbers, especially assist-wise. And that's what you want as, your primary ball handler. But I do think the Chicago Bulls and Josh Giddey are going to agree to a contract because if you're the Chicago Bulls, you really didn't get too much, back in the Alex Caruso trade. You didn't get the future first round picks that, everyone thought you were going to get because OKC has basically hoarded all the first round picks around the NBA. You got Josh Giddey back. And yes, he is a really good young player. And if you let him walk out, you kind of just gave, OKC a championship player and you kind of helped them win a championship too because everyone knew Alex Caruso could be that championship glue like that Derek White. And that's why everyone was like, hey, you could probably get, 2 first round picks for this guy. And you really did not get as much as you would like. And everyone knew that too. But you did get Josh Giddey back. And you're going to have to overpay him. Yes, you're going to have to pay him $30 million a year, most likely. But you're willing to do that because, he's going to make players around him better. Yes, is he going to hurt, the team too, spacing wise and defensively? Yes. But you're willing to take that. Overall, I do think the Chicago Bulls and Josh Giddey are going to agree to a contract negotiation. But yeah, let's move on to the next player we're going to talk about, Cam Thomas with the Brooklyn Nets. And obviously, I think he's the best, restricted free agent that's still available. Obviously, he's young, he's promising. He scored about 24 points a game, 3.3 rebounds, 3.8 assists, shot 43% from the field, and about 35% from three. And these numbers, people are saying, these are empty stats because, he's just a scoring guard. He doesn't get others involved. Obviously, defensively, he's not going to be, a really good, defender, especially in the perimeter because he's not the biggest. He's about 6'2", 6'3". There's reports saying that the Brooklyn Nets offered, Cam Thomas a 2-year, $28 million deal with a team option. And obviously, this offer is just a disrespectful offer. And obviously, his team is not going to accept it. And they're kind of probably looking for, a, trade or, hey, we're just going to come back on this, qualifying offer and play through it. But, we're most likely going to get moved at the trade deadline because they don't want to lose him for nothing. And I'm guessing his team wants him, around that, making a 90 million to, even 100, something $1 million, over, a long contract, which yes, he may deserve, but are you willing to pay Cam Thomas, who a lot of teams, yes, realize that, hey, he's just a natural scorer and we kind of want him off the bench? And I think Cam Thomas realizes, hey, I don't want to come off the bench because I've proven that I could be a starting, shooting guard, or I could play point guard and I could, score. But that doesn't really, contribute to, winning games, obviously, because, the Brooklyn Nets, haven't made the playoff. And obviously, you do have 5 first-round picks that you're bringing in. I mean, are you going to play all of them? No, but are you going to play, 3, 4 of them and, just see, hey, who can, contribute right away and who needs more time in the G League? And, Cam Thomas is, going to take those minutes most likely. And you're already bringing in, Michael Porter Jr., who is taking up the majority of your salary cap. And yes, they're kind of, in a sense, the same person. I know a lot of memes are going around because, they're more just offensive skill players and not really, playmakers and, defenders. So it will be an interesting, dynamic if we do see them share the court together. I really think their defense is probably going to be one of the worst around the NBA. And he did only play 24 games last year, and this is something to look at. Obviously, he hasn't really been, injury prone like we see with other small guards. But this is something to look at because with small guards, reoccurring and nagging injuries, especially in the lower body, is something to look at because if you're gonna sign him to, a longer deal worth, more than he's worth, this is something that you have to look at because it's gonna be way harder to, trade a smaller injury prone guard. And I'm curious of what they're gonna do because, if he comes back and like qualifying offer, next, off season where, teams have more salary cap, he's gonna be an unrestricted free agent. So maybe he could get more money. I'm guessing that's what they're gonna do, or is he gonna get, a 3 year, $180 million deal with a player option on the last deal? But yeah, I'm curious of what y'all think where each, top remaining free agent is gonna sign with, and is there gonna be more, trades happening? But yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.